Let's kick things off with the always brilliant Douglas Murray, best-selling author and associate editor of The Spectator. Douglas, when it comes to the much-needed wake-up call on cultural conflicts in the US, we thought the pandemic would be that wake-up call. It wasn't. So tell me, is the war in Ukraine finally providing some perspective?
You might have thought it would, wouldn't you? But it appears not to have done. It's true that a lot of the media spent certainly the days of the war in Ukraine, focusing only on that. And maybe that made some of us once again think, well, thank goodness this will make all of our comparatively flimsy cultural wars go away. But of course, no such thing has happened. As we discussed last week, we had the Leah Thomas controversy. We're back to endless examples on a daily basis of major media organizations refusing to say the term women, for instance. We have all of these same idiocies rolling around us, and always that sort of strange obsession, particularly in the American culture wars, with microaggressions and with tiny little complaints, tiny little fringe human rights complaints around the edges, all the while not very far away, real human rights violations happening on a daily basis. And you would have always hoped that sort of thing would put the microaggressions era in some perspective, but I fear it just won't.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And more bad news in the US, particularly for the Biden administration, with the president recording his worst poll numbers yet. His approval rating fell to 40% in a new NBC News poll released today. And just as alarmingly, Douglas, this would be alarming for the Democrats. The poll revealed 7 in 10 Americans expressed low confidence in President Biden's ability to deal with Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Well, I have to say, I mean, it's obviously very disturbing for the Democrats, but it's rather obvious why that has happened. Don't forget, this is the president who at the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine claimed that Vladimir Putin had just invaded Russia. He's gone on to a whole set of just very typical, sadly, Biden-esque gaffes. But now they've become very, very serious, Rita. I mean, look at what's happened in the last week alone. Biden telling American troops they'll be heading to Ukraine, a gaffe. White House rolled it back. Biden saying that if Vladimir Putin uses chemical weapons, America will reply in kind. Which, of course, again, the White House had to roll back and say, no, the president didn't mean that if Vladimir Putin uses chemical weapons, America will use chemical weapons. And then worst of all, in Warsaw, he does this perfectly adequate speech and then decides to go off message in typical Biden-esque fashion. And at the end of the speech, suddenly suggests that it's American policy that Vladimir Putin has to leave leave office in Russia, has to be deposed, perhaps. And this one single throwaway statement of Biden's immediately, again, had to be refuted by the White House and say this isn't official American policy. When Joe Biden said that this guy Putin has to go, he was simply talking metaphorically or in some other fashion. But you know that's a pretty serious thing to happen, Rita. I mean, throughout the Cold War, American presidents did not speculate publicly about deposing Soviet leaders. It's not the sort of thing you want anyone to be in any position of power to be speculating about. And here's the leader of the free world going off message with perhaps the most serious message of all. And so of course Americans don't have much trust in the way that Biden is running this, because he hasn't earned their trust. Quite the opposite. From the White House press team down or up, depending how you look at it, Americans think that the American president has to have the White House staff coming after him with a pooper scooper, trying to clean up every and any remark he makes.
Which is all the more remarkable given how few interviews he does, how few questions he takes, and just about everything he says is written on an auto cue, and there's still these gaffes. So it's incredible stuff. Now, you mentioned
no wonder it's on an auto. No wonder it's on an auto cue, by the way, Rita, because I mean, remember, you know, the going off auto cue, he has the risk of starting World War III. I mean, we see again, no wonder they don't trust him in front of the media, because the next thing that might happen is a great big mushroom cloud and the end of human life.
Oh, gosh, I'm laughing, but really this is a serious issue.
No.
People are genuinely fearing that. You mentioned earlier the reluctance of some to even say the word woman. It's apparently an offensive term these days, and we've seen that attack against womanhood from the left again. Here's Forbes on the weekend referring to pregnant people, not pregnant women. And then there's this ugly misogyny with this London-based period product company referring to women as bleeders, this company, Yoppie or whatever the hell they called. Douglas, there's some good news, though, on that front. The BBC yesterday changed this absurd piece after a backlash. So the original piece read, a condition that affects 1 in 10 people of any age in the UK who are assigned female at birth. That was changed to a condition that affects 1 in 10 women of any age in the UK. Far more sensible, far more straightforward. You might think it's important, but it's really important, Douglas, to not continue to cede linguistic territory to the fringe-dwelling activist class.
Absolutely. I mean, we've said before, but there's nothing more ridiculous, is there, than this assigned at birth nonsense. You know, it's as if a nurse just sort of flips a coin every time a baby comes out and says, oh, I wonder if I'll call this one or a boy or a girl. I wonder how I'm feeling today. It's pathetic, and of course it's more than a linguistic game. It's a serious health thing. I mean, public health campaigns like this that are designed to make sure people are aware of conditions that they could get. Public health campaigns have to be as straightforward as possible. You know, they have to be as direct as possible so that the public respond to them and become more aware of various ailments they could fall ill to. So when a public information campaign about our health actually misleads the public and uses obfuscating language like this, it actually becomes a health issue. And this is the problem, isn't it? You know, the linguistic game becomes an issue in women's sports, but then it becomes an issue in women's health. And you'd have thought, Rita, that that would be the point where people would say, not just the BBC, but anyone would just say, right, enough. We've had enough of this. You can play these games in your weirdo sort of campus circles if you like. But when it comes to women's health, no way. You don't get to do this.
But we've also seen charities, breast cancer charities and other language health messages be completely mangled by this effort not to offend anybody. But let's move on to Whoopi Goldberg, because she's been in the news again. She's been getting a bit of attention lately. This time she's asked the royals to apologise for slavery. Let's listen to a part of what she said.
Not ignore the fact that Britain ran ramshod over India for years.
They enslaved India as well.
Created all kinds. Yeah, that's why I'm saying let us not forget when we talk about what needs to happen, all the folks that need to apologize. And you know, listen, this is not new. And I suspect Charles, when he was in
Barbados,
had some idea, because he went on and apologized as he was releasing the hold that Britain has. So perhaps somebody's listening.
Douglas, what's your reaction to what you just heard?
It's so ridiculous, isn't it? Some of our viewers may be blessed in not knowing what The View is, but The View is the least watchable television program in America, where 5 of the stupidest people that can be selected in the nation get to opine around a table and make endless gaffes and presumptuous statements. Whoopi Goldberg herself was in trouble just a few weeks ago because on The View, she made the original comment that she thought the Holocaust wasn't about race, and that in any case it was a sort of white-on-white thing, and so it wasn't any business of black people. Anyhow, she ended up actually being suspended briefly from this program and has only just come back. So she's come back after that gaffe of her own to say that the royal family should apologise for slavery. Now, here's the thing, Rita. The British abolished slavery over 200 years ago. The act abolishing it was passed in the reign, wait for it, of George III. Now, Her Majesty the Queen is jolly old, but that is a long time before Her Majesty the Queen was born. So there's sort of something very typical about our age in this, isn't there? Whoopi Goldberg demands that the royal family should apologise for something which no royal has had any connection to for over 200 years. And meanwhile, Whoopi Goldberg still hasn't given a very good apology for something she said only a few days ago. And therein lies one of the great mysteries of our time. How people cover over their own very recent mistakes by calling for other people to apologise for things they have no connection to.
And finally, multi-billionaire Elon Musk has caused a bit of a stir by hinting that he may buy Twitter or set up a rival social media platform. Musk posted, given that Twitter serves as the de facto public town square, failing to adhere to free speech principles fundamentally undermines democracy. What should be done? Douglas, there's no doubt that big tech leans heavily in one direction, and we've already seen the eagerness of such platforms to censor and suppress legitimate stories. We saw that with the New York Post Hunter Biden laptop stories in the lead up to the 2020 election. Could Musk possibly correct that? Could he bring some balance into that arena and give us a platform that's got genuine free speech principles?
It's a very interesting question. And of course, when Musk says that Twitter is the de facto public square, he's both correct and signalling part of the problem, because, of course, Twitter is the most dementing platform of any social media platform. It's the one on which people behave most irrationally, most cruelly, most vilely, and expose themselves at their very worst. So if the town discussion in the world these days sounds a bit demented, it is because Twitter is the town square, as Musk said. Of course, there's a lot that could be done about it, and the question, as always, is can the institution change, or does another institution have to be set up? The rather thrilling thing about Elon Musk speculating about this is, of course, he is one of the very few people in the world who could just buy Twitter in the same way that most of us can sort of buy a coffee in the morning. So it would be very interesting to see Twitter taken into hands that actually understands principles like free speech. Of course, there's a challenge, though, isn't there? Because we've seen various people trying to set up rival platforms. There's been Parler. That still exists, but it's been battered by the mainstream tech platforms and indeed the media. There are other platforms that have been getting going in recent years. Donald Trump, of course, announced that he was going to have his own sort of social media platform. I don't think that's the answer. I think that it would be great if there was a sort of rival to Twitter that could end up eating its lunch. One of the problems of it, though, is that all of the ones that are set up in order to sort of correct the unbelievably leftward-leaning tendency of Twitter end up having the risk of being sort of echo chambers in which people don't get that scintillating taste of the stupidity of their opponents. And so that is what you'd have to recreate. But if you could just recreate a platform which just wasn't biased against conservatives and against what's often just true, that would be a heck of a start. But Elon Musk would be a great person to do it.
I hope he does. I hope he just buys Twitter, because I think you're right. Every time a rival platform is set up, it falls into the same problems that Twitter has had, just in the other direction. So if he buys Twitter, that could change things.
Here's an idea, Rita. How about we persuade Elon Musk to buy Twitter and then send it into outer space?
That would be good for humanity indeed. Douglas Murray,
Wouldn't it
thank you
just?
for joining me tonight.